I'm Courtney Ray, BARC's Associate Director, and I have with me Mia, one of our volunteers. Hello, Mia. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll jump right into our presentation. So BARC's work really involves activating the public and concerned members of the public for the protection of the resources within Mount Hood National Forest. And we do this through lots of workshops and trainings to get folks up to speed on the way that national forests are managed and the way that the ecosystem in Mount Hood functions. And between those two realms of knowledge, we can then be influential in decision making by engaging with the Forest Service through the projects that they plan, specifically the timber harvest or logging projects, are often called restoration projects. And so some of the activities that we organize for folks are campouts to go and visit areas that have been logged or are threatened with logging, day trips to do ground truthing, which is the main work of our volunteers, to compare the conditions in the forest with what the Forest Service project plans say. So that includes really documenting all the ecological conditions, from the plant community to the age and size of trees to the slope and landscape, the presence of wetlands or streams, different wildlife. And we do this in all seasons so that we have a really full picture of the ecological conditions. Mia, you want to pipe up for anything here you see?
Well, it's really nostalgic to look at all of these pictures from the olden days when we got to stand next to each other. I really miss that. Yeah, if you have never come out ground truthing, we're still doing it. There are 2 virtual ground truth trainings coming up this month. And if you like being in the forest, this is just gonna rock your world. I don't really just go hiking for pleasure anymore because it feels shallow and it feels like I'm just being a consumer. And being able to participate in this way brings me into a meaningful reciprocal relationship with the forests that I value.
Thanks,
Jack.
Mia. So the Zigzag Timber Sale, as you might guess, is located in the Zigzag Ranger District. Mount Hood National Forest has 4 different districts: the Clackamas, Zigzag, Hood River, and the Barlow. Right here where it says Mount Hood National Forest is actually the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation lands. It's a pretty unfortunate placement of the title. And so the Zigzag Ranger District is really familiar to folks in Portland and to anyone really west of the Mount Hood, because it is kind of the gateway to all of the recreation sites, especially the ones at the top of the mountain, all the winter sites. And so along that Highway 26, those small communities like Welch's, Rhododendron, Government Camp, places like that, very familiar, and lots of day trips and things like that are accessible for the Portland community. It also has the part of the Pacific Crest Trail, part of the Mount Hood loop trail that goes around the base of the mountain. And so logging in the Zigzag Ranger District has raised a lot of concern. It's got a lot of people who might not otherwise notice, say, a logging project way down in the Clackamas or way out on the Barlow District, are hearing the names of familiar trailheads and mountaintops and things like that, and rivers. And so we know that it's incredibly controversial to the recreation community, even as, you know, BARC has our own concerns about its controversialness and its impact on the ecosystems and watersheds. So the Zigzag Timber Sale is the first timber sale proposed in the Zigzag District in about 8 years. Back in 2011 or 12, they proposed a sale called Horseshoe in the same district, in the Zigzag District. That sale was canceled in the very first stage, the very first phase of its planning, because there was so much uproar and opposition. A lot of the opposition centered around there being mature and old growth forest in the area, The area is between many designated wildernesses, and so wildlife habitat is pretty continuous there, even across the part that is not in a wilderness. So to kind of punch in some logging in the middle, right amidst a bunch of wilderness areas, concerned folks. And it is also the headwaters of the Sandy River. And so the Sandy has had a huge investment in salmon restoration, salmon habitat restoration over the last 20 years or so. And folks are very concerned that putting logging up in the headwaters would undo a lot of the restoration efforts in the Sandy. So that was 8 years ago, but prior to that, there hadn't been a timber sale proposed in Mount Hood or in the Zigzag District since the beginning of BARC. So we're looking at an area today that hasn't seen a timber sale in at least 20 years, which means a lot of that forest is recovering from logging back in the 80s or even earlier. And it has received, you know, so much love from the recreation community and so much investment in the watersheds, specifically around salmon. Just as a quick example, on the left, you see all these different color codes in the key there, designating different types of in-stream or nearby salmon habitat restoration projects. Millions and millions of dollars have gone into protecting the watershed and putting in structure that salmon love, and it has been incredibly successful, as the Sandy River is considered a salmon stronghold, which is kind of a keyword in ecological terms. That means for the size of the habitat, it has a larger community of salmon returning than you would expect for the several miles, however many hundreds of miles the watershed is. And the Sandy River is one of the largest cold water refuge going into the Columbia River, which, as we all know, is warming dramatically all the time and harming the salmon that are returning from the oceans up the Columbia. So protecting the salmon, or protecting the Sandy River for fish to actually be in the river, and also protecting the Sandy overall as it delivers cold water to the Columbia, have been really successful over the last 20 years. And again, it just doesn't really make sense to put a big logging project right on top of all that restoration work. On the right, it's a picture of the same kind of area. Right here where I'm circling with my cursor is the same as what's on the right here, the clear fork of the Sandy River and the muddy fork. And right around here, all these green colored areas are the logging units. So they're just right above the very headwater, uppermost parts of the Sandy River basin. Not cool.
This is a great juxtaposition, Courtney, putting these side by side. Makes it pretty, it's pretty striking.
And the thing is, the Forest Service,
it's pretty forehead slapping too. It's like, wait. You guys did all this restoration and now you're gonna log over it? What?
Yeah, the groups that did much of this are part of the Sandy River Basin Watershed Council partnerships, Sandy River Basin Watershed Council partnerships. So it's dozens of groups, of which the Forest Service is one. And so the Forest Service was part of the decision-making team and the investors in doing all of this here on the left, and they are also the ones doing this here on the right. Salmon, one issue. So when you start to learn about what's going on with the timber sale, one of the first things you'll get is a project information sheet. This is just a screen grab of it, but I will send this link out and it's available on our website. That kind of gives an overview of the project, where it is, what they want to do, how much logging they want to do, what types of logging they want to do, why they want to do it, anything else they're going to do, like if they're going to build extra roads or move a trailhead or close off some roads or put some logs in the stream for salmon, or any kind of project stuff that will be included. It should all be kind of surfaced here. It's not a super detailed document, but this is the early information that we have on the Zigzag area and on the logging that they intend to do. So what we know is there are two. It's split into two areas, the Horseshoe area and the Mud Creek area. The area called Horseshoe is geographically the same as that horseshoe timber sale that I mentioned earlier that happened, that was proposed back in 2011 or so. And so we already had spent so much time, BARC had already spent so much time in this area working against the horseshoe timber sale back in the day, that we had a little bit of a better baseline understanding of what the conditions in these parts of the forest were. The Mud Creek area is a bit farther away. It's up by Trillium Lake, just south of Trillium Lake, and it is the headwaters of the Salmon River. Another, if I were to switch back, you would see there have been many restoration projects on the salmon as well. So we knew this. We knew, actually, let me just show you. So you see the date on this document, January 2020. This is the first document that the Forest Service made public to the public about the project, although BARC had been asking about what was going on and what the plan for the Zigzag project would be for about a year prior to this. And that's because they put the names of their projects on their 5-year plan. So we know the names of all their timber sales that they want to do right up until like 2023, but we don't know where they are or anything like that until they put out something like this. So in 2020 is when the public got any kind of information about this timber sale. This document is dated 2018. And what it is a memo from the American Forest Resource Council thanking the Forest Service for taking them on a field trip to show them the exact areas that were going to be logged in the Zigzag project. So that's almost a year and a half prior to it being made public. We find this deeply concerning that the industry was given kind of a sneak peek or a first look at the area, and then the Forest Service went and said to us, we don't have anything to show you. We haven't gotten that far in our planning. We couldn't point at it. You know, we don't have any details for you. We know that they did now that we dug up this memo. And the whole of this memo is also on our website if you want to look at it. So now I'm going to show a few pictures of areas that we visited recently. And Mia, feel free to jump in whenever you want. This is an area that I went and ground truth last fall, which is why no one's wearing masks in these pictures. In the Horseshoe Ridge area of the Horseshoe part of the timber sale. It's right up the road from the town of Rhododendron, just a little bit north of there. And so this is a pretty typical look at the area that we ground truthed. It's a pretty open forest. The trees are not tiny. They're not super mature, but you can see that there's, there's maturation is happening. It's fairly open, easy to walk around in, and there is a trail just right off screen there, a pretty well-used hiking trail. And so this is an area that they would want to restore through thinning because it's overstocked. These trees are crowding each other. They can't grow fast enough when they're this close together and things like that. And honestly, a lot of the forest kind of looks like this. It's like, I call it in recovery. You can see that there's stumps and things and downed wood from back in the day. I think we actually did find signs of that a fire had come through as well. And so it's a natural forest at this point. Besides the stumps, it's really its structure and its shape and its dynamics are just random, and it's not a plantation. But they would like to alter it so that it is a little bit more uniform, so that things are all could be more easily harvested again later. So this is one of my personal crosses to bear, I guess, when it comes to this timber sale.
I'll say that as a more recent volunteer and more recently arrived in understanding this work, I still have tremendous cognitive dissonance when I read these documents from the Forest Service, and they literally never come out and say, yeah, we want to sell some trees, and so we're going to go cut down some trees. This is presented as a forest health treatment. that by just incredible coincidence also happens to be an opportunity to resource some forest products.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of double speak that's there. And so going into these areas and thinking about, like, is this a forest health treatment? I still, like, I get a headache still trying to think that, like, that's the mind frame. Is that really the mind frame? Is that the spin? Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of reading in between the lines to do. So here, and I'm going to show you a different thing as well, which is why I kind of changed the view. This is Unit 43, and I put these two pictures up here to illustrate that Unit 43 is one thing, but as you can see, different parts of the unit will look very different. So there's a pretty steep downslope here. These trees are fairly smaller. There are a lot more of them. There's a lot of them that have fallen down because they're starting to, like, weed themselves out and give themselves enough space without anybody having to bring a chainsaw in to do it for them. Whereas also in Unit 43, there's at least some areas that are a bit more mature, have already started to open up. There's bigger downed wood and things like that. And so when we find a detail like this and we say to the agency, like, you can't treat this whole area as if it's uniformly one way or the other. You need to be very, you need to have a site specific way that you're going to address whatever it is that you think you're going to do. Just to make your own logic line up, you should not paint everything with such a broad brush. You should get very specific about what the conditions on the site are. And so one of the ways that we get this information, can you all still see my whole screen? Do you see this new page?
Yeah, I can see it.
The story map,
yeah. The story map. Yep, okay. I got the story map.
So this is a resource that the Forest Service has begun to provide these in the last few years. It's an interactive map that comes with the project. This is the first one I've used, actually. And I'm going to show you how to use it quickly so that you can come back to it sometime. And we're going to go look at Unit 43, that unit that we just looked at. So this story map, you want to use these tools right here, the legends and the layer list. So the layers are the different features of the landscape you want it to show you. And the legend is the ones that you have that, it's a legend. It lets you know which color means what. So I have selected on my layer list the units. So these numbered little blobs are each different unit of logging. So they've drawn out on the map where they should log. And you can see the little cutouts. Those are where streams are and things like that. And other things they might want to cut around. They might want to not cut. They're like, leave a gap. But everything that's in this beige color, that is one of the units. So we went to Unit 43. Who sees it?
Go straight up.
Right here.
Yep, that's it.
Here's Unit 43. And so we can see that it's 18 acres and they want to thin it. And we just saw these photos that let us know that there's at least 2 different forest types within that area.
Oh, and you know what else was on that story map there, Courtney?
Yeah.
Is that this is their description, is where it says stand PLT. That means that in their description, this is a plantation.
Plantation. And what plantation means is at some point back in the day, it was planted very intentionally with, like, probably just one species in a, like a crop. Which much of the forest has gone through that, and it's all kind of trying to, like, become chaos again the way it wants to be. But if we look at these images, we might think that this part had been part of a plantation, maybe. But this part doesn't look like it was, or if it was, it's already kind of shaken off that plantation structure. So we would want to question them about calling that a plantation and get them to use a more accurate description before they decide that they're whatever the actions they want to take in there. You can also turn on the stream layers and all kinds of things. So when you're playing around, and I know, Bill, you said you went up somewhere, you might be able to find I don't know, I'm not sure exactly which route you took. Did you come the Hood River way, I think you said? Which means if you did, you went through a bunch of county land and it probably was pretty chopped up. But if you wanted to, say I love Last Chance Mountain, which I do actually, and you can just like park on the road here and hike up this hill and strain your muscles if you want to be up here, and just camp, you know, wherever you feel like it. So I can see now that in order to get to my favorite camping spot up here on Last Chance Mountain, you know, they might log like from the place where I usually leave my car to where I typically go up and all around it. And how would that impact my experience? You can also turn on, well, if you see here on the sides, you can turn on lots of different features so you can see where they are, the roads.
And you'll notice one thing it'll do is during the season when they're doing it, those roads will all be closed. Like the whole area will be closed. There won't.
A lot of what they're proposing on this horseshoe side is going to be done by would, if they get to do it, be done by helicopter. So they cannot have people running around in the forest underneath while they're toting big logs down from the helicopter. So they would close that all off. These roads here are the ones that they intend to build. So, oh no, look, now I know they're also going to like punch a big dirty road in right through where I usually go. So by using this map and by selecting all the different features out of the layer list, you can figure out what they want to do on something that you care about.
You guys, is it okay if I cut in?
Yes, please do.
Do you know where McNeil Point is in Topsper?
Yeah, it's right up here.
Oh, okay.
I think.
So,
I'm pretty sure
part of what is in this proposal is that they want to reroute the trailhead.
They want to move it because you see, here's the trailhead to Topsper right here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right on these streams, basically. And because people park, you know, it's just not, the trailhead doesn't have any place for the amount of people who come up there to leave a car. So people kind of like drive and park all over here. And so they want to move it. And I think there's a layer that shows me where they want to move it to. Hang on.
Yeah, I saw something about Topsper reroute.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. So if we turn that on, you can see they want to move it over here and have the trailhead start over here and come around instead of going up. You know how it's pretty, it's not steep, but it's like up right there.
Yeah.
When you take off and you meet it right here where it meets the PCT, it kind of goes like this right now. And so they want to close that and move it over here. Maybe that's a good idea. You know, sometimes the Forest Service does things that need to be done. Sometimes it's not a lot. The majority of what they spend their time, energy, and resources on is getting those wood products. And if they'll say it's about moving the trailhead to protect all these streams from extra parking, but all of this stuff is not coincidental. You know, they package it in that way so that their reputation stays intact.
Yeah, I just love the view from McNeil Point up there. I just wonder if, because there's the valley right there. I mean, it looks like.
I'm not sure because like this slide mountain is kind of in the way if you would be able to see any of this stuff down here.
Mm-hmm.
And this stuff is also kind of on the northwest side of the top part of the canyon that the sand is in.
So where's Ramona from here then? That's like.
Ramona's out here. Let's see. I think it's this trailhead, isn't it, Mia?
Yeah, because it's like Burnt Lake is right over there, right? Or I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, Burnt Lake is.
Because I thought it was going to be right near Burnt Lake. I thought some of these cuts were going to be.
Yeah, part of something that was somewhere in the proposal was about closing part of the road into the Burnt Lake trailhead and just making it a longer trail.
Mm.
Which also that wouldn't be a terrible idea.
It might be right there, that lake that you can see right by the cursor.
I keep wanting to point to the screen, right, and be like, it's right there.
Is there? I think it's right here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those two, I think.
Zoom in. Oh,
it's either the one by 796 or it might be the.
Oh, here we go.
Burnt Lake, yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that trailhead there. So there's no unit right there. But to get to these units, they would probably close that road.
Yeah, but the reason I brought that up is I think Ramona Falls is right where your cursor is now. Isn't it like right north of there? Right? I thought it was right by Burnt Lake, like right north over by the Sandy.
Yeah.
I think Ramona, where I've never actually
I thought it was
been.
up higher.
Yeah, I think it's up higher too. I think you go up past the horse camps on Old Main Flat.
Okay. Oh yeah, there it is. I just saw the road right there.
So that's how you use the map, right? You use the layers. If you get confused, you look at the legend and you're like, oh, okay.
So I wanted to say,
yeah.
I want to just chime in for our other participants that Courtney's whipping around this story map pretty fast. It's really, really interesting. And this is a link to this is going to be in what Courtney is going to send out. It's pretty, it doesn't take a lot of figuring out to figure out how to play around with it. It's really interesting. There's a lot of information in here. And you can
And who created this? Is from the Forest Service?
Yes. Yep.
Actually,
They start.
That's crazy.
Super useful. So.
Well, it starts with all of these pictures of like, look at this plantation that's ready to be harvested. Look at this forest that needs a health treatment.
Yeah, I'm in user customized, so I'm looking at it the way I want to look at it. But if you start at the beginning of this presentation, it's like we're doing, you know. So I just skip all these dots and I go right down to the map. But yeah, I usually tell people, make sure to read through this. So you understand the context that they're putting it in. And why and how they're constructing that context. Okay, back to slideshow. So, a couple more examples of, oops, I think I had one more. Yeah, so another unit 33 here, also in the Horseshoe area. We got a slope with a lot of even aged trees. You know, these trees all look pretty similar size, but then elsewhere in the unit you have this flat, it was unmarked, so that means the Forest Service did not note that this area is a big soggy cedary, like marshy foresty part, with bigger older trees. So riparian areas, obviously very sensitive because of how soft and soggy they are, and the plant community that lives in them. They're not really supposed to log in them. It says in a number of different forest management plans and criteria to not log in riparian areas unless it's going to make the forest healthier. So number one, they didn't map this area, so they would have logged right over it if they didn't correct their maps. But since we've been there, we can document this. We got the GPS, we got the photos through ground truthing. We can ask them to update their maps to actually accurately reflect where this unmapped riparian area truly is. And theoretically, if they were to interpret their jobs in the best possible way, they would say, we have no reason to log in that riparian area, so we're gonna not. But that remains to be seen. They may say, oh, it'll make it healthier, so we are going to log in it. We also have rec sites. This is French's Dome. It's a rock climbing site. It is in the Horseshoe area. This forest around it is slated for logging. You can see kind of, you know, the trees are all kind of a similar size. This is also a very, very steep slope. It would certainly be done by helicopter logging. It would certainly close access to any climbers here. And so we're trying to get them to drop that unit or shrink it. Oops, see?
We're trying to get Courtney's dogs to mellow out. So this is something else that we're looking for. That cute little critter on the right is a red tree vole, and red tree voles are an amazing little rodent that lives their entire life cycle in the canopy of old growth Douglas firs, and they are one of the main food sources of northern spotted owls. And on the left, that other cute critter is a bark employee standing there with a tree that has been identified as an active red tree vole nest site. And so in the forest plan, there's a requirement for a confirmed active nest site to be buffered by a 10-acre buffer. And in a different timber sale, in the North Clack timber sale, what Bark and then a tree climbing organization, Nest, determined was that the Forest Service had taken kind of a cursory look and said, no, there's no tree voles here. We're not going to worry about it. And then Bark and Nest found dozens and dozens and dozens of active red tree vole nests. And when enough nests that each need a 10-acre buffer get stacked up in a unit, then it can really reduce the size of the unit, and sometimes the unit will be dropped entirely. So this is something that we're looking for, and especially because there are legacy trees, there are older trees, old growth trees within these units that the Forest Service is describing as, it's just a plantation, nothing to look at here, just move right along, folks. And so this is where the work of Bark volunteers and then the volunteers from Nest who actually do the tree climbing and confirm these red tree vole nests is really critical.
Mm-hmm. So there will be more surveys. These were areas that Bark suggested the Forest Service do surveys in. We saw these areas, we thought, these look like tree vole trees. And we requested in our scoping comments earlier in the planning period that they were to look specifically in these areas. Lo and behold, they found some. There's probably more. So yeah, we're going to focus on this summer. Okay, we're going to move over to the Mud Creek area. So everything I just described was over in the Horseshoe area. That's a part that's near the Top Spur Trailhead. This is the part that's near Trillium Lake. So one of the tools that we've recently started using as well is this thing called LiDAR, which basically the satellite can tell you like how far the distance between itself and the thing on the earth. So whether it's just the flat land of the desert or the top of a tree, it can compare the heights of things. And so by using this, we can identify where the tallest trees are. In red, these trees are at 170 feet tall. And tall trees generally are older trees, generally are bigger. So we go to those places first and we prioritize that, looking for that mature or old growth or leaning into old growth, the places that tree voles like, the places that spotted owls like, the forest type that is the most rare after 100 years of just taking everything. And we're not finding the epic old growth that, you know, existed in the 1800s so much, but we are finding the oldest existing growth. And LiDAR helps us kind of zero in on where to spend our time, because look how many units there are. And this is a screen grab. It's cutting off the rest of the units from the lower part, the more southern part of this area.
Yeah, this is like a third of this area.
Yeah, there's many more units down here, but we are going to talk briefly about unit 168 right here and 129 right here, which we have been to. So this is unit 168. This is what it looks like inside an area where the trees are very tall. You see this is a pretty large tree. It's got this pretty robust understory with the rhododendrons and the ferns. And this isn't a super widescreen shot, but I don't see any stumps in here. I don't see any cut logs in here. Maybe this one back here, hard to say. It looks very natural. It looks like when things died and fell over, it was because it was their time, not because they were harvested. And this is obviously, if you look back at this, it's a very large unit. It has scatterings of these bigger, taller trees. There's streams running through it. And so to treat all of this as one unit, first of all, is, you know, making everything very vague. And so we want to differentiate between the different kind of smaller ecotones or forest types that are distinct from each other within this big unit. And then in unit 129, this photo on the left, I took this last fall, which is why no one's wearing masks, when the Forest Service took us on a field trip, and they said, you know, this unit is designated for a scenic view shed, which every inch of the forest is designated for a specific use. They predetermined that back in the 90s what it was for, or in the 80s actually, and they said it's not providing attractive, visually appealing scenery, yada yada, so we want to regenerate this area, which in layman's terms means cut down like 80% of it, basically clear cut it, so that it can start over. This is what regeneration harvest is, just the new language for clear cut, is to take, you know, almost all the trees, to take really close to 100% of the trees and call it regeneration. We're regenerating it. We took away all the old stuff that wasn't good enough so it can start over. And then Mia was here more recently. You want to talk about it, Mia?
Sure. Yeah. So that tree on the right, that's, what was I think that was like a 52-inch diameter tree there. That if they are planning to do regeneration harvest here, that means they're going to take most of the trees away. And that's certainly, and I'm looking right now on my phone at my map of what I found in that unit. But that tree there is certainly a good candidate for a red tree vole.
So as part of their regeneration, would they remove that tree if they could? Obviously.
It's possible. Mm-hmm. There is
I
no.
think it's gonna look better in 300 years.
There is no rhyme or reason to the things that they think are going to lead to the things they're going to lead to. If these trees on the left are somehow like not good enough, apparently, what makes anybody think that the next batch of trees is going to be any different? It could be site conditions that are keeping these trees from getting very big. I can see mistletoe in these trees, which kind of does inhibit the growth of trees, but it also provides nesting platforms for a lot of animals. So the thing is, if you're trying to create a product, then you want big, straight, uniform trees because that makes nice, easy to chop up lumber. But if you want an ecosystem, then you need stuff to die. You need some things to, you know, get kind of like corrupted by mistletoe or rot or whatever might happen to them, because that kind of decay is what creates all the conditions for all the life to continue doing its cycles and processes. You can't have like a sterile, perfect tree farm and have a forest at the same time. And I think the agency is under the impression that you can. That's kind of their philosophy, is you can both have a farm and a natural ecosystem on the same exact place. Or they somehow they think they can. I don't totally understand it. So yeah, you know, they said that
so
these trees,
like having these two things together, like having this as that this is a B2 scenic view shed and they're proposing for regeneration harvest, it's completely inconsistent. Like no one looks at a regeneration harvest, a clear cut, and says, oh, that's a visually appealing forest scenery.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
That's just not a real thing.
Is that their main definition down there at the bottom? Is that sum it up, or is there more to it as far as
There's
scenic?
more to it, but that's the purpose of a scenic view shed. Anything designated for this is what they're supposed to be helping it do through their management as the agency. And when it says utilize vegetation management, that means logging. Vegetation management is logging. So yeah, like, you know, it's incongruent, it's contradictory, it's bureaucratic, and it all pencils out from their perspective. So it actually makes it really hard to argue with them, because it all comes out square if you only think of it the way they think of it. The agency.
Is there anybody in the Forest Service that's fighting for the trees, or are they all just foxes in a hen house?
They all have different jobs, right? There's the timber program, which is one of the bigger programs, definitely has more staff than like the interpretive recreation program. There are scientists and field study people and researchers, but the timber has the biggest priority. It has the most demands on it, and it has the most resources allocated to making sure it happens, and it has the most robust kind of thinking and policy and bureaucratic structure behind it to make sure that it happens. We don't have anything like this around carbon sequestration. We don't have any kind of robust programmatic resources and personnel around recreation, even though recreation is a huge economic driver, even compared to the timber economics. So, and that's, you know, that's agency, that's just part of the Bureau of, it's in the USDA Forest Service, is Department of Ag. So all of it is, you know, it's fundamental reason for being, right, is not what many people assume it is. It is to provide the timber. Whether or not we need the timber in the market, in fact, they have to provide the timber in a sustained way, even if there's nowhere to sell it to you at the time. They have to continue to plan to log it, even if there's no clear.
Yeah, I was wondering, I saw something about quota, and it's like, why is there, you know, who decides the quota, and why is it even, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, there's committees.
Yep, we can
Congress,
go there
there's
too.
Lobbyists. Then the foresters at the regional level kind of decide, and they divvy it up amongst the different national forests that are under their region. It's bureaucratic. It's a lot. It's a lot of functions and procedures.
And I'm assuming the quota goes up and down with different administrations.
It goes up and down. It's been steadily going up since about 2008.
Wow. Yeah, because it's weird. I you know, everybody's always complaining that the logging industry is dead or blah blah blah, and it's like I see more logging than ever, I feel like. But
yeah, logging continues to increase. The amount of jobs doesn't necessarily increase because so much of it is done with mechanical, you know, machines and mechanical processes. You don't need people. So even if more logs are coming off, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be more jobs, and it doesn't mean there's going to be more money locally, depending on how those logs where those logs end up going at the end.
Yeah,
so,
it seems like the best way to, I mean, in a lot of these communities, the best way to regenerate is through recreation. And how do you do that? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we need the Forest Service to have more directions around recreation. It's like they have hundreds of directions around logging and like a couple dozen around recreation. They literally aren't set up to support recreation the way they are set up as an organization. So that's the bigger work, right? Besides just going out here and confronting whether or not what they're intending to do on these particular acres makes sense or not. There's the thing of like, fundamentally, what do we want this agency to be doing? What should their job be? And how can we make sure that it's resourced and supported and has all the tools and personnel and, you know, whatever to do the things that we think it should be doing in this day and age compared to what it was designed to do 120 years ago.
Yeah.
So we went over like the horseshoe area over by Topsford. We've gone over a little bit of the Mud Creek area. There'll be more information coming out all the time now. I'm going to throw a few more things up there, and we're coming to the end of our time. So let me just kind of launch. So there are a number of species of concern that we are specifically looking for in the area. The Cope's giant salamander, the harlequin duck, and this plant critter called a moonwort fern. Emblazon those onto your mind. There's been so many duck. People are emailing me all the time about seeing these ducks, people who live up there. So there's a ton of harlequin ducks on the sand.
What? Really, Courtney?
People email me like, they send me their pictures that they took when they were out walking their dog, or if they live right on the Sandy. So
wait, really?
Beautiful ducks are just
okay. We have to tell. ODF and W really wants to know about that, and nobody is allowed to set foot near a harlequin duck nest.
I don't know anything about the surveys. I just know that people have been seeing them on the river. So yes, flag that one.
But they're sending you pictures
of ducks, not of nests. I don't know where.
But of harlequin ducks on the river.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk.
Recreation. These are just some of the trailheads and rec sites. When you use that layer on the story map, I had to remove a bunch of them to make the map legible. Bazillions of recreation sites are potentially going to be impacted, degraded, or at least get cut off from public access. And if people, I mean, we're already seeing what happens when people can't spend as much time in the forest, they can't spend time in those communities, and they can't, generate that recreation economy by spending that money. So closing them off completely might, only exacerbate what we're experiencing right now, due to the coronavirus.
How do the people in rhododendron and Welch's, how do they feel about it? Because whenever something kind of gets cut, I tend to avoid it. I'd rather go somewhere more natural, obviously. And it seems like most people do, unless they're going to go there just to shoot guns or something. But
I mean,
but I just wonder how.
I haven't polled the whole communities, but there's about probably 100 or 150 people that I've been in contact with over the last 8 months or so, who are concerned, who, and they're not even necessarily concerned about the loss of tourism or something. They're more concerned just that this forest that hasn't been logged in 2 decades, that's maybe, just starting to come back from heavy logging prior to that, that they spend their afternoons, and their houses are here, and they're familiar with all these places, and they're more concerned just about the degradation to the actual ecosystems and to the creeks and streams and rivers, that are downhill from all these logging projects, than they are about. I haven't heard almost any commentary specifically on, oh no, but what about all the hikers that usually come and buy pizza from me or anything like that. The vast majority of the concern that I've heard has been about the habitat and the wildlife and the water. So, I've talked to a few business owners, not a lot. They still echoed the concern for the ecology more so.
Wow.
This was before, this was back last winter, last fall, early this year too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, because I go up there with my family, we like to camp in the summer. We like a lot of those restaurants in the area, or Salmon River too, just in general. And if it's all cut up, I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm sure other people would too. But so, I mean, that's will affect them, at least in the summertime. I mean, I don't know how business is in the winter coming back from the mountain and stuff, but yeah. And obviously these folks, when it comes to people stopping in to do business, they've already, there's already been several months of that not happening. So the hardship of losing the recreation dollar is not replaced by the timber dollar. And yeah. But, if you have, what would they gain from a clear cut? Are they getting, they're not getting any money kicked back to them, are they?
Nope. That's not how it works. The money just goes to the government. It doesn't go locally. It's not directed specifically to the place where the trees necessarily came from. There are some projects that work that way, but this one is not designed that way. And it's never 100%. It's like a tiny fraction might get to stay there. Yeah, because this is public land, right? It belongs to the government / all of us. It's not really a local resource once you extract it. It's a local resource as long as it stays intact, but once you take it out, it's extraction.
Wow.
So what do we want? The Forest Service, like I said, they do cool things sometimes. This would be a cool thing if they were to go into these areas and find all these places where the road shouldn't be there, where the road is inhibiting a creek and these headwater areas, and if they were to just remove that road. When I say these, I'm not talking about travel roads that people use to get to places. I'm talking about basically little cul-de-sacs for log trucks that have been there for decades. It's just enough road to get a truck in and then turn it around and get it out. And they've built them. There's 3,000 miles of roads like that in the forest. Not the paved roads that people use, not the roads that go anywhere. Just these little spur roads, little platforms and landing zones that are specifically just for logging activities when they leave them there because they think they're going to come back and log it again later. So if we can get them to,
those, right?
if we can get them to do this. No, they don't get maintained.
Spend a lot of money.
They don't really get maintained, so they just disintegrate and fall into the creek.
Don't they maintain a lot of roads though? Just
Yeah,
for
they maintain, I mean, they maintain a lot of roads, and then there's roads that they build and then don't maintain. And there are problems with all of the roads that they maintain, and there are problems with the roads that they build and don't remove and don't maintain.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a lot of roads stuff in our organization. Roads are a big, big deal. We've been combating the roads issue the whole time we've existed. So decommissioning the roads, restoring the streams, especially in the headwaters, especially of the Salmon and Sandy Rivers, which are part of this stronghold basin for salmon, that would be ideal. I would love to see the project that plans that and shows me on the map every road that they're going to take off, rather than showing me every patch they want to clear cut. Recreation. So you've been around, you've seen the trash, the unfortunate, like illegally created trails, whether it's like mountain bikes and stuff, or dirt bikes, or four-wheelers, or just people just driving their car or Jeep somewhere, or, shooting things up and chopping on, all kinds of illegal recreation is going on, and it's not monitored because they only have a couple of people working for the Forest Service whose job it is to go around and kind of like make sure people aren't wrecking things. What would it look like if they were to redirect all that timber sale planning money toward recreation management, to keep people behaving properly, and also to create more access, make sure all the trail signs and things are in all the languages they need to be in, make sure all the restrooms and facilities and things like that are like enough to maintain this like always increasing recreation presence. The population is growing around here, and it's because people want to spend time out here. So if there isn't any infrastructure to keep them safe and healthy and keep their messes where their messes are supposed to be, then we're going to see ongoing, degradation simply because it's not invested in. And then the return on that is billions and billions of dollars that is spent in, day trips, overnight trips, fuel and hospitality, all the stuff, all the things that create the recreation economy. So we would love for the Forest Service to show us the map of where they're gonna clean up all the trash sites and fix all the illegal roads, and how they're gonna hire, 50 more people to support the public in recreating well, rather than letting all this stuff kind of slip between the cracks just because they don't have enough resources or staff persons to keep up with it. So here's the timeline, and we're very close to the end of the presentation. Might go over, sorry, I told you it was gonna be hard. So this starts from back in January when the whole thing started. We are here. Forest Service releases preliminary assessment. It is the second draft of the project. It's a description of the whole project, what they want to do, where, for what reason, where they should say where they're going to build the roads, although they've been declining to tell where they want to build roads. They originally intended to have this out in May. It's not out yet. Maybe it'll be in July. We're unsure. We're waiting for it. We're waiting for the PA. And as soon as the PA is released, it will trigger a comment period where the public can comment on the information that is in that PA. It's a 30-day comment period. So as soon as that happens, we're going to have our volunteers and our staff kind of tear it apart, try to dissect everything and understand what it is, and then do a series of workshops on that so that people can understand what's being proposed, and they can create their arguments or identify their concerns and get their comments in within that 30-day timeline. This is the thing that BARC exists for, because if you didn't know that this was happening and then you found out there was 30 days and then you had to go back and do all the research to understand everything that they've described there, what they're trying to do, and how would you even know what parts of the forest looked like or what conditions they were in to be able to know if what you thought they were proposing was good or not, right? They say it's a public process, they're making it public, they're inviting the public to comment, but really it's so much work in such a small amount of time that it's a barrier. Most people can't keep up with this stuff. And so our whole model is to like stay on it, be a couple steps ahead of where they think that where they want the public awareness to be, and plug people in and give them the tools and the information so that they are able to participate in this very, like, I don't know, just complicated and process that happens on a really short timeline. Like, we've been waiting for months for the PA, but as soon as it happens, we only have 30 days. So, and this will be the last chance for members of the public to get on the record. The first chance was back in the scoping period. That was kind of draft 1. In draft 2, it's the last chance. So if you don't comment by the end of the environmental assessments comment period, you will not be able to comment later. You can't raise any concerns or objections later if you haven't got on the record now. So just putting anything in writing, putting your main concerns in writing and putting them in, super, super, super important. And once it happens, we'll do our ground truthing training. Well, that'll happen either way. We'll do comment writing trainings. We are doing socially distanced ground truthing for trained volunteers.
Oh,
So
can I jump in about the comment writing trainings?
Yeah, please.
So, because that's me and Courtney and a bunch of other volunteers and some staff too. That is going to be really specific about this project, about this Zigzag project. And we're going to do a session for each section. And it'll be really hands-on about like how to, you know, get your own document written so that you can get on the record and make public comment. And when we submit comments, it's a really like formal legal process. It's not like a letter to the editor. It's a formal legal process. And then people who do this participation then become legal parties to this. And so then we get all of the notifications and information, and it gives us standing to object if we have an objection to the formal or to the final project.
Right. So after that, you wait for a few months while they take everyone's comments into consideration, and then they put out their final draft of the project. It's called the draft decision. And at this point, if someone is already on the record, they can continue to comment through the objection period. If you're objecting, it better be illegal. You better understand that the thing that they're proposing is technically illegal, and you better know why, because that's all you have left. You can't say, this is bad judgment, or this is an inappropriate action, or we don't think this is going to come to the results that you think it's going to come to. By objection period, the remaining things, if they're still trying to do things that are illegal, that's what you want to object to. And so we will be looking for them if they're, you know, continuing to try to log in areas where those tree voles are, or if they're, you know, whatever we can find that isn't allowed by environmental law and by their own management plans. That's the kind of stuff that you can object to. And anybody who's on the record already can be part of that process. You can then request the Forest Service meet with you to resolve your objections, and they might. And if they don't, you can decide if you want to become part of a lawsuit against the project, against their decision. If, barring any objections, they will just go forward with whatever their draft decision is, whatever this description of the project looks like, and their goal is to have those contracts out to logging companies by next spring, so that logging would actually be happening as soon as the winter conditions were over, and the wet weather and the wet ground was done. That's when logging would happen. So that's the timeline. We'll be in touch as the PA comes out and making sure people have everything they need to comment. Next week, ground truthing training. I have to look at my speaker notes, and then I can get the links here and put them in the chat. So in the chat here are the links to register for those 2 workshops, and a link to the Facebook group that is Zigzag Timber Sale group. It has a lot of the folks who live up in the area in it. It's a majority of folks who live in the area, I think, at this point. And there's basically this information that I've given to you here is posted there, so you can join that group if you like. You can register for those 2 workshops by going to the links in the chat, and I'll send them out in a follow-up email as well. Any questions? What time is it? Did we do it? It's 8:32. It's not even that bad.
Woo!
Did pretty great.
Did you ever do it? Yeah. Doesn't that look so restored?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That forest looks so healthy now that it's had its treatment.
Yep.
Yeah.
These are typical images of thinning.
Okay, Nick.
Well,
yeah,
let me end the recording and just say thank you everyone who's watching, and please check out bark-out.org for more information.